Retirement is supposed to be the great reward at the end of decades of hard work. It's painted as the golden season of life. No more early alarms, no more bosses to please, no more endless traffic or stressful deadlines. Instead, we're told to expect peace, travel, time with family, and finally, freedom. But the truth for many people is very different. The first weeks may feel exciting, even relaxing. But then the days begin to stretch long and empty. You wake up later and later, sometimes with no real reason to get out of bed at all. The silence in the house, which once felt restful, begins to feel oppressive. The hobbies that you thought would keep you busy only fill a few hours, and then the rest of the day looms large, unstructured, and heavy. The sense of purpose that work once gave you, even if you didn't always enjoy it, is gone, and without it, life can feel strangely hollow. This is why so many seniors find themselves depressed, frustrated, or even angry after retirement. It isn't because they've done anything wrong. It isn't because they are weak. It's because human beings are built for meaning, for contribution, for connection. When those things suddenly vanish, the emptiness rushes in to take their place. Couples who thought they would enjoy their golden years together discover that being in the same house all day can breed tension instead of joy. Friends drift away, routines collapse, and slowly the mind begins to believe that life has nothing left to offer. Some retirees feel guilty for struggling, because society told them retirement should be paradise. But in reality, it is one of the biggest emotional adjustments anyone can go through. And if you feel lost right now, you are not alone. Thousands of men and women over 60 are walking through this same valley. The good news is this: feeling depressed after retirement is not the end of your story. There are steps you can take to rebuild purpose, restore joy, and rediscover yourself in this new season. Watch this to the end, because what you hear today may be the beginning of hope returning to your life. This is the story of Walter, a man who had just turned 69. For 40 years of his life, he woke up every morning at 5 o'clock sharp, pulled on his work boots, and made the familiar walk to the same manufacturing plant in his town. The routine never really changed. He knew the sound of the machines like the back of his hand, knew the smell of oil and iron that clung to the air, knew the faces of his co-workers who became like a second family. Some shifts were long, some days were backbreaking, and there were many times he came home exhausted, but the work gave him identity. He was not just Walter. He was the man people depended on, the one who showed up, the one who got the job done. He was proud to be the provider for his family, proud to carry responsibility on his shoulders. On the day he retired, his co-workers threw him a party. There were balloons tied to the old break room chairs, a cake with his name iced across the top, and a chorus of congratulations that left him both embarrassed and honored. Everyone told him he had earned his rest. "Now you can relax," they said. "Now you can enjoy life." Walter smiled, shook hands, hugged his closest friends, and even laughed a little. But inside, he felt something he couldn't quite name, a mixture of relief, fear, and emptiness. He told himself it was just nerves, that it would pass. A week later, the house felt too quiet. He sat on the couch in the morning with the television flickering, remote in hand, but nothing on the screen could hold his attention. He wandered from room to room without purpose, sometimes rearranging things that didn't need to be moved, sometimes just staring out the window. For the first time in decades, he had no reason to wake up early, no co-workers to greet, no sense of being needed. The weight of that truth pressed on him more with each passing day. His wife noticed first. Walter, once talkative about work and news, had grown quiet. He seemed restless, snapping over small things like the way she folded laundry or the meals she cooked. Sometimes he sat in silence for hours, frowning without realizing it. Other times, he grew angry over things that never used to matter. He wasn't just adjusting to retirement, he was unraveling inside. The man who had been strong and steady was slipping into frustration, irritability, and sadness. Walter didn't have a word for it at the time, But he was experiencing retirement depression, a struggle more common than most will ever admit. Step 1. Rebuild your routine. Walter's first mistake after retirement was thinking he could finally do nothing. For the first few days, it felt like a luxury. Waking up late, sitting in his chair with no schedule, drifting in and out of naps, watching television until midnight. But as the days stretched on, that freedom began to feel more like a trap. Without structure, the hours blurred together. Morning turned into afternoon, and afternoon slid into evening without him ever feeling like he had accomplished anything. The lack of purpose began to weigh on him, and with each passing day, his energy and mood sank lower. He began sleeping until nearly noon, often skipping breakfast and starting his day with the television. By the time his wife asked if he wanted to help with chores or join her in the garden, he felt sluggish, drained, and uninterested. The truth was, without a rhythm, Walter was falling into a cycle of idleness that fed his depression. Days felt meaningless, and the man who once thrived on responsibility now felt like a shadow of himself. His wife noticed the difference and gently told him, "You need something to look forward to each morning, Walter." That was when Walter realized he had to rebuild his routine. He didn't need a job to have structure. He simply needed to create one for himself. So, he set his alarm for 7 a.m. and promised himself he would not hit snooze. The first morning felt strange. He got up, stretched, and walked slowly to the kitchen. He made himself a proper breakfast, eggs, toast, and a cup of coffee at the table instead of slouching in front of the TV. Then he laced up his shoes and walked around the neighborhood for 20 minutes. The fresh air filled his lungs, and though his legs ached at first, he felt more alive than he had in weeks. He began adding small tasks to anchor his day, watering the plants after his walk, reading a book for 30 minutes, writing in a notebook about how he felt, and taking time to fix little things around the house. None of these tasks were monumental, but together they gave his day a backbone. His evenings changed too. Instead of staying up late with the television blaring, he decided on a bedtime of 10 p.m., allowing his body to rest. Slowly, the cycle of sleepless nights and groggy mornings began to shift. The difference was remarkable. Walter felt a sense of accomplishment, not because he had done anything extraordinary, but because he had given his day meaning again. His mood began to lift, his energy improved, and his wife noticed the change. Even something as small as making the bed each morning reminded him that the day had a beginning, and what began well often ended well. What's one small habit you could add to your mornings? Maybe a walk, a prayer, a healthy breakfast, or a phone call to a friend that would give your day more structure. Share it in the comments. Your idea might inspire another retiree who feels just like Walter did. Step 2. Find purpose in contribution. After a few weeks of retirement, Walter began to feel the emptiness of his days pressing in on him. It wasn't only about the silence or the lack of routine, it was about the loss of being needed. At the factory, his phone buzzed constantly with questions, his co-workers relied on his decisions, and his supervisors trusted his judgment. Even at home, when his children were younger, he had been the strong one who carried their burdens. Now, with no job to go to and no young children to raise, Walter felt like a spare piece in the machinery of life. He muttered one morning as he pushed his breakfast around his plate, "I don't know what I'm good for anymore." His wife looked at him with sadness, unsure of how to reassure him. She could see the light dimming in his eyes. This sense of uselessness is one of the deepest struggles retirees face. Work, whether loved or hated, had given Walter a sense of purpose. It was proof that he mattered. Without it, he felt invisible. Depression crept in through that gap, whispering that his best years were gone and that no one needed him anymore. But the truth is that purpose doesn't retire, even if a job does. Walter discovered this when a neighbor mentioned the local food bank was desperate for volunteers. At first, he scoffed. "I've done enough work for one lifetime," he said, waving his hand. But later that night, lying awake in bed, He thought about it. What would it hurt to try? The first morning he walked into the food bank, Walter felt out of place. He didn't know anyone, and the work seemed small compared to running a factory floor. He stacked boxes, sorted cans, and handed bags to people who came through the line. But then something happened that changed him. A young mother with 2 small children looked him in the eyes and whispered, "Thank you." It was just 2 words, but they carried a weight that made his chest tighten. She wasn't thanking him for moving boxes. She was thanking him for helping her feed her children. In that moment, Walter realized that contribution wasn't about scale. It was about impact. Week after week, he returned. Slowly, he began to recognize faces, greet people by name, and even share jokes with the staff. He looked forward to those mornings. Instead of dragging himself out of bed, he found himself rising with energy. His depression began to lift, not because his circumstances changed, but because his perspective did. He wasn't finished. He still had something to give. The truth Walter learned is that contribution doesn't always come through big, dramatic gestures. Sometimes it's found in simple consistency, showing up to volunteer, mentoring a younger person, helping a neighbor with groceries, or spending time with grandchildren who crave attention. Every act of service is a reminder that life still has meaning. Psychologists often say that giving back is one of the most powerful antidotes to depression, because when you pour into others, you refill your own sense of worth. His wife noticed the difference after a month. "You look lighter," she told him. Walter smiled softly and replied, "It feels good to matter again." Purpose had returned, not through a paycheck, but through people. He realized retirement wasn't the end of usefulness. It was simply an invitation to contribute in a new way. Where could you find purpose again? Could you serve at a food bank, mentor a younger neighbor, join a community project, or even help a friend who feels alone? Share one idea in the comments. Your words might spark hope in someone else who feels the way Walter once did. Step 3. Stay connected. One of the most dangerous traps Walter fell into after retirement was isolation. At the factory, even on the hardest days, he was surrounded by people. There was always someone to joke with during breaks, someone to argue with about sports scores, or someone to talk to about their family. When he came home, the house had once been full of his children's noise, their laughter, their arguments, their endless needs. But in retirement, all of that was gone. His co-workers carried on without him, his children had homes of their own, and suddenly the house seemed much too large for 2 people. At first, Walter thought solitude would be restful. He told himself he was fine sitting on the couch, watching television, and letting the phone ring without answering. But slowly, that silence began to weigh on him. The longer he avoided people, the more he convinced himself that no one wanted his company. He stopped calling old friends, avoided neighborhood events, and even declined invitations from his children. The more he withdrew, the lonelier he became, and the lonelier he felt, the deeper his depression grew. His wife worried about him and gently suggested that he join a local retirees walking group she had read about in the community newsletter. Walter frowned at the idea. "I don't know those people," he said. "What would I even say?" But one morning, after another long night of restless sleep, he decided to give it a try. The first day was awkward. A handful of retirees stood in the park, chatting easily as if they had known each other for years. Walter kept his hands in his pockets, unsure where to stand. But as they began to walk, one man slowed his pace to match his and asked, "So, what did you used to do?" That simple question opened a door. Walter began to share about his years at the factory, and before he realized it, the walk was over. He went home with something he hadn't felt in weeks, a spark of connection. He returned the next week, and the week after. Slowly, faces became familiar. He learned names, heard stories, and even began to laugh again. These were people who understood the strange emptiness of retirement, people who had walked through the same shadows of frustration and loneliness. Sharing the journey with them reminded Walter that he wasn't alone. Connection doesn't erase depression overnight, but it keeps it from growing in the dark. Every conversation was like a small light breaking through the fog. Over time, Walter even started reaching out to old friends again. He called a former coworker just to catch up. He visited his brother who lived a few towns away. He realized that connection didn't always have to mean big gatherings. Sometimes it was as simple as one phone call, one shared walk, one cup of coffee with someone who cared. Human beings are not meant to carry life in isolation. Retirement can make the walls of your home feel like a prison if you let it. But stepping outside those walls, even hesitantly, can open the door to healing. Walter discovered that laughter shared on a morning walk was one of the best medicines for his sadness. His wife noticed the difference too. He came home from his walks standing taller, with energy in his voice. Who is one person you could reach out to this week? Is there a neighbor you could greet, a friend you could call, or a group you could join? Write their name down and take the step. Like Walter learned, connection is not just about passing time. It is about remembering that your story is still being lived, and it is meant to be shared. Step 4. Explore new passions. Walter had spent so much of his life focused on work and family responsibilities that he had forgotten what it felt like to do something simply because it brought him joy. At the factory, every task was about efficiency, productivity, and deadlines. At home, most of his energy went into paying bills, repairing things, and keeping life moving for his wife and children. Somewhere along the way, his personal passions had been shelved, tucked into the back of his memory like old books collecting dust. Retirement, at first, only made this worse. With nothing structured to fill his days, he found himself sitting idly, drifting between television channels, and feeling restless without knowing why. One afternoon, while cleaning the attic with his wife, Walter came across an old guitar case. The leather was worn, and dust clung to its corners. He had bought that guitar decades ago, back when he was a young man with dreams of learning to play. Life had gotten busy, and the guitar had been forgotten. His wife smiled when she saw it. "You used to sit on the porch and strum that, remember?" she said softly. Walter opened the case and ran his fingers across the strings. The sound was rusty, uneven, but it stirred something inside him. That evening, he brought the guitar downstairs. At first, it was frustrating. His fingers were stiff, his memory weak. Chords that once seemed simple felt impossible. He wanted to quit, but something told him to keep trying. Night after night, he sat with the guitar, fumbling through basic songs. Slowly, muscle memory returned. The sounds grew smoother, the rhythms more familiar. For the first time in years, Walter felt a spark of excitement, a sense of discovery. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about creating something for himself. This was the beginning of exploring new passions. Walter realized that retirement wasn't only about what he had lost, it was about what he could rediscover. Hobbies and interests that had been buried by the demands of work and family now had room to breathe. For him, it was music. For others, it might be painting, gardening, photography, writing, or even learning something entirely new. Retirement gave him permission to try without pressure, to enjoy without needing to achieve. The more he played, the more Walter noticed changes in himself. His mood lifted during the day because he had something to look forward to in the evening. The frustration he once felt sitting idle on the couch was replaced by the satisfaction of making progress, however small. His wife often sat nearby, listening as he strummed. Sometimes she hummed along, other times she simply smiled. The guitar became more than a hobby. It became a way of reconnecting with himself and sharing something new with a woman who had walked beside him for decades. Exploring new passions is not about filling time. It is about awakening the parts of you that life once forced to sleep. It is about remembering that your identity is not just worker, parent, or spouse. You are still an individual with creativity, curiosity, and capacity for joy. Walter discovered that each attempt, even when clumsy, reminded him he was still alive, still growing, still capable of learning. If you feel restless in retirement, consider what you once loved but set aside. Was there a craft, a sport, or an art you always wanted to try? Was there a dream you postponed because there was never enough time? This season of life gives you the chance to reclaim it. Even starting small, 5 minutes a day, can reawaken your spirit. Walter's guitar wasn't about music alone, it was about giving his days meaning again. Your passion could be the same key for you. Step 5. Take care of your health. Walter didn't realize how much his physical health was tied to his emotional well-being until his wife gently suggested he schedule a checkup. He had grown sluggish, gained a few pounds, and was sleeping poorly. Most days he sat in his recliner, feeling drained before he had even done anything. Depression whispered that he was simply old, that slowing down was natural, that there was nothing he could do. But the truth was that neglecting his body was only deepening the fog in his mind. At the doctor's office, Walter was told what many retirees hear. His blood pressure was creeping higher, his cholesterol needed attention, and his lack of exercise was taking a toll. The words stung. For years, Walter had seen himself as strong and capable, but now his body was reminding him that time had passed. On the drive home, his wife reminded him gently, "You still have years ahead of you, but only if you take care of yourself." That truth stuck with him. He started small. Each morning, instead of sitting with the television, he walked around the block. At first, his knees ached and his breath felt short. He wanted to quit after 5 minutes. But he forced himself to finish one lap, then another the next day. Slowly, his strength returned. The fresh air, the sunlight on his skin, and the rhythm of walking cleared his thoughts in ways he didn't expect. After a few weeks, he found himself looking forward to it. His wife also adjusted their meals. Instead of heavy fried foods, they added more vegetables, fruit, and lean proteins. Walter missed his old habits at first, but soon realized he had more energy. His sleep improved, and the headaches that had bothered him for months began to fade. Taking care of his body began to lift the fog of his mind. He realized that depression wasn't only emotional, it was physical too, and addressing one meant addressing the other. Walter also learned the importance of checkups. Regular visits to the doctor, taking prescribed medication, and asking questions about his health gave him a sense of control. He no longer felt like his body was betraying him. He felt like he was working with it to stay strong. His wife encouraged him daily, reminding him that small steps added up to big changes. Within months, Walter's mood shifted noticeably. He still had hard days, but his energy was higher, his mind clearer, and his spirit stronger. Taking care of his health didn't just improve his body, it gave him hope that he could face this new chapter with strength. What about you? What's one small step you can take this week for your health? A walk around the block, drinking more water, stretching before bed, or calling your doctor for a checkup. Just like Walter, you may find that caring for your body is the first step in healing your heart. Step 6. Practice gratitude daily. Walter's struggle with retirement depression often led him to focus on everything he felt he had lost. He no longer had his job, the children no longer filled the house with noise, and the constant motion of life that once gave him energy had slowed to a crawl. His thoughts were heavy, circling around what was missing, what had changed, and what could never return. The more he focused on what he didn't have, the darker his outlook became. His wife noticed this and gently suggested he try something different. "Instead of looking at what's gone, why don't we try to notice what's still here?" she said one evening. That simple suggestion became the seed of change. At first, Walter resisted. Gratitude felt like a hollow exercise. "What's the point of writing things down?" he grumbled. But one night, he agreed to try. He picked up a notebook, stared at the page, and slowly wrote, "I'm grateful for the warm tea I had tonight." It seemed silly, almost too small to matter. The next night, he added, "I'm grateful for the walk I managed today." On the third night, he wrote, "I'm grateful my granddaughter called." Over time, these small entries began to add up. Something subtle started happening. By forcing himself to notice small blessings, Walter began to shift his perspective. Instead of ending each day brooding over what he lacked, he began ending it by remembering what he still had. The notebook became a quiet companion, reminding him that life, even in retirement, was still filled with gifts worth noticing. His wife joined him in the practice. After dinner, they would sit together and share their lists. Sometimes hers included something simple like, "I'm grateful for the way the sun came through the kitchen window this morning." Other times, it was bigger, "I'm grateful that we're still walking this road together." These exchanges softened the tension between them. Where criticism once filled the air, gratitude now took root. Walter noticed that gratitude began to affect his mood in unexpected ways. He walked with more energy because he appreciated the strength of his legs. He listened more carefully to his wife because he realized her presence was a blessing. He even found himself laughing more, appreciating moments that would have once passed unnoticed. Gratitude didn't erase his struggles, but it gave him the strength to face them with hope. The practice grew over the months. On particularly hard days, when depression whispered that nothing mattered, Walter flipped back through his notebook and read his own words. Seeing dozens of entries reminded him that joy had not vanished. It was still there, woven into his days, waiting to be acknowledged. Gratitude became a habit, a lens through which he saw his life differently. Walter's journey through retirement depression was not easy, but it revealed a truth that many seniors overlook. Retirement strips away routines, titles, and responsibilities, but it does not strip away your worth. The struggles he faced were real: the silence of his home, the loss of identity, the creeping loneliness, and the whispers of uselessness. Yet what transformed his life was not a dramatic miracle, but the steady choice to take small, intentional steps. Rebuilding his routine reminded him that his days still had shape. Finding purpose through contribution showed him that people still needed what he had to give. Staying connected gave him laughter and companionship. Exploring new passions reawakened a part of him that had been buried under years of duty. Taking care of his health gave him strength to face each day with renewed energy. Practicing gratitude shifted his perspective from emptiness to abundance. Each step built on the other, slowly weaving hope back into his life. His wife noticed the difference. His family felt the change. Most importantly, Walter rediscovered himself. Retirement, he realized, was not the end of his story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where meaning came not from a paycheck or a time card, but from living fully in the present. Depression no longer defined him. Instead, gratitude, connection, and purpose became the markers of his days. This is the message for every senior who feels the weight of loneliness or the fog of frustration after retirement. You are not finished. Your golden years do not have to be gray with despair. They can be bright with joy, even if it takes effort to uncover it. You are still needed, still capable of love, laughter, and growth. Do not believe the lie that your best years are behind you. They can still be ahead, if you choose to nurture them. Walter's story is not just his. It is a reflection of what is possible for anyone willing to take small steps. The golden years are not about drifting into silence. They are about rediscovering life with fresh eyes and a renewed spirit. And if you choose, like Walter did, to rebuild your days with purpose and gratitude, you too can find peace, joy, and connection in the season that lies before you. If Walter's story gave you hope, tap like right now. It tells YouTube this message matters. Share this with a friend who is retired and struggling. And subscribe to Love and Life After 60, Because your golden years should not be empty. They should be full of peace, meaning, and connection.